Stationed in Iraq, her truck was blown up by an IED that led to her NDE. This is Robert Manni, host of Guys TV, and this week my special guest is Natalie Sudman. We're going to talk about her book and her near-death experience right here, right now on Guys TV. You can also catch me on KCAA Radio here in Southern California and on Guys Radio, my worldwide podcast. Guys TV, Guys Radio, thanks for your support. Okay, Guys Radio, I got a very special guest today who has had a near-death experience. I know we've had a few other folks who've experienced near-death on the show before, but Natalie Sudman is very special, and her experience and her take on it is very refreshing, very different. Let me tell you a little bit about her. She was born in Montana, raised in Minnesota, earned an MFA from the University of Oregon, and she worked many years as an archaeologist in the western part of the United States. In 2006, she went to Iraq, administering construction contracts for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which I'm very familiar with because with my house down the Jersey Shore, twice they came by and they dredged out the ocean and actually rebuilt the beach. They do tremendous work, and people aren't that aware of the great things that they do around the world to help us out. For Natalie, while working in Iraq, the vehicle she was riding in was hit with a roadside bomb. Her book, Application of Impossible Things, details these experiences within that incident. She's an enthusiastic traveler. She's lived and worked all over the world: Iraq, Florida, Antarctica, Wyoming, Spain, etc. She's been to New Zealand, Europe, Mexico, the Middle East, and very briefly China. And right now, if the information is up to date, she lives in southern Arizona. Her poetry and essays have been published in various literary journals. Her nonfiction book, which we're going to talk about today, The Application of Impossible Things, My Near-Death Experience in Iraq, was published by Ozark Mountain Press, and she occasionally blogs at her website, Trace of Elements. Welcome to Guys Radio, Natalie Sudman.
Thank you very much, Robert. Nice to be here.
Well, let me first say that Natalie read me after the session. I found it to be very helpful. It's about a month or so ago. I was actually listening to it last night, and I fell asleep about halfway through, but that's a good thing because it relaxed me, and it was great to hear what her source had to say through Natalie to me. So thank you again for that, Natalie. And you'll find if you want to get a reading from her, she's very much in demand, but it's worth the wait. So for context, Natalie, let's start at the beginning. How did you find yourself working in Iraq as a civilian working for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers? And prior to your accident, what was that like?
So I was employed by the Bureau of Land Management out in southeastern Oregon, and I was doing archaeology, but I was doing a lot of administrative work, which I didn't really enjoy. I wanted to be back outside. So I was looking for other work. And in the process of doing that, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers put out a call to all government agencies asking for help with Hurricane Katrina cleanup. So I volunteered for that twice. So I spent about 2.5 months down in Louisiana and Mississippi. And during the course of that work, I met some people who had either been to Iraq or Afghanistan or were planning to go. And they told a bunch of us that we could get jobs in Iraq if we wanted to. And I didn't really take that seriously at the time, but a friend called me a couple months later and said, "Hey, we've got jobs in Iraq. You want to go?" I said, "Sure." I got the phone and thought, "Oh, do I really want to go to Iraq of all places?" I did want to go overseas, but I didn't really want to work in Iraq. But I thought, well, yeah, let's go see what's going on over there. And so I deployed in August of 2006. And what was it like? Boy, I don't know how to sum that up. I was administering construction contracts, which I had a couple different positions within that, but basically there were roads, there were water treatment plants, health clinics, Coast Guard facilities, police stations. There was all kinds of different projects that Iraqi contractors were building, and with money from the United States. So basically the rebuilding effort in Iraq.
Where you were stationed, Natalie, did you feel that like was this a hot spot? Was this a real? I mean, obviously, all of Iraq was a hot spot, but did you feel like you were in a prime danger zone, or was it an area where it was more about rebuilding and it wasn't really where the fighting was going on?
It wasn't where the fighting was going on. I was down in the south in Basra province. It was very quiet when I first got there in August, and a few months later, the U.S. Army did, they put a lot of pressure on some of the areas up north, and that chased a lot of the action down south into our sector. Okay. So maybe by January, February, in my memory, I would have to check this. In my memory, by late winter, we were getting barrages of incoming probably between 4 and 8 times a day. So mortars and rockets, and it got a lot more dangerous to go outside the wire because there were a lot more IEDs.
Okay, that fateful day, you were in the truck, I guess, and it got hit by an IED from underneath. So tell us, for our audience who are not familiar with you, what happened? Because everything changed at that point. And I know you've told the story a million times, but it's important.
Where do you want me to start? You can tell me where you would.
Well, what happened? Just like you were in the truck, and then because I know you went to another environment, and the whole book is about what happened and what seems to be, in your estimation. And I love the way you approached what happened to you, because you look at it from a artistic standpoint, I would say, and an intellectual standpoint. And there's a lot of explaining about how you perceived what happened. And what I found fascinating was that, and it was all probably about 5 seconds in Earth time, yet you have an entire book explaining it. So it's really amazing because there's a lot of quantum aspects to your experience. Forgive me for digressing, but so you're in the truck, what happened?
Yeah, that's right. So I was in the truck, kind of half asleep, head on hand, because it had been a long day outside the wire of construction site visits. I was pretty tired, and so I was kind of half asleep, and then suddenly I was not. I was standing on a little stage with thousands of beings all around. But if you imagine kind of a stadium setting, that might be close to what this was like. And I was not confused about what was going on. I knew exactly where I was, and I knew exactly what I was doing. And what I was doing was downloading information to these beings. And when I was finished downloading that information, then I communicated to them that I wasn't interested in going back into the body. I was done. And they accepted that, and then said, well, that's fine, but what if you went back and did this? Oh yeah, that sounds really fun. So the same way I got to Iraq, I got back into a body, I guess. And these beings, I don't remember how I described it in the book, but I have talked about the communication with these beings as a form of telepathy, but it really is much simpler than that. It's really just kind of opening up and making information available, and it's taken in, it's comprehended in an instant. So it's not, I would say it's more conceptual than it is verbal, certainly. And the information that I was downloading to them, I think I describe it as broadly cultural. And by that, I mean that if you think of information all the way from the level of interpersonal communication or relationships within any culture, all the way to perceiving a culture as a broad flow or organization of energy, there was information on all the levels between those, and maybe beyond that as well.
Did you
Go ahead.
feel when you were there, and did you know, like, okay, I got blown up, here I am, I totally understand this. A lot of folks have the experience that some I've talked to, some I've read about, where they go through the tunnel and then they get met by their father or something, or Jesus, and they get a hug. And I'm not trying to dismiss that by any means, but your experience was different, and you seemed very aware of, here I am on the stage, I'm downloading these quote unquote beings, which have a lot of different types of definitions. They were not human, but they had human aspects. You communicated telepathically with them. And then you realized that you had your choice and you decided to come back. Do you think, Natalie, that this was part of your experience, was part of, I know you say later in the book, we kind of get what we expect. In other words, when you die, if you expect Jesus to meet you, you'll probably be met by Jesus. If you expect alligators, maybe you'll be chasing around by alligators or whatever. It's kind of what you determine, that's kind of what you get.
Well, I think that certainly has a lot of influence. I'm not going to say that everybody gets that. Maybe we get what we need instead of what we expect. But I think that we retain a lot of the beliefs and the perception that we have while we're in the physical when we leave the physical, at least for a while. And maybe for only a few moments for some people, and maybe for quite a long time for other people. I think if you think about standing in a doorway, I don't know if you ever did this, and pushing out with your arms against the doorway, and then you step out of the doorway and your arms just go right up.
Right.
I think of it in that kind of way, a muscle reflex. Like, we're used to concentrating and holding our awareness in this body and this reality. And I think that it may take a few moments or a lot longer to get that to relax and to kind of return to or restore our perception to something much larger. That's my thing.
Okay, very fair. When you were there, then you said that you wanted to stay, you didn't want to go back. Were you aware of the injuries, the injury factor, and you'd have a lot of rehab and stuff like that? Or what was, if you don't mind my asking, if it's not too personal, why did you want to stay?
Oh, it's so comfortable. It's just, you feel like people talk about the love, and I guess, I mean, I could talk about it that way, but I think that we often, if we talk about love, we think of it as an emotion. And I'm going to say that I was in the state of love as a state of being. We all were. And so the way that feels is that I belong here. I have a place here. I'm respected. Everybody else is respected. Everybody gets along. There's no tension. There's no competition. There's no friction. It's very, very easy, and it's very freeing. It feels very creative. It feels very smooth and complete. It just feels really good. It's hard to be here,
That's true. We're all squeezed into these 3D bodies. We get busted up and stuff. So, well, thank you for coming back, by the way, because you have so much to offer. So thank you. But so when you were there, did you recognize any of the beings? Was there anything, I don't know what friends, family, relatives, any of that stuff?
I didn't recognize any of them as people that I know in this lifetime. I didn't really look in that way. I was very much in that place. I really, really left behind this physical world. I wasn't kind of looking for, oh, where's my grandparents? Or I didn't do that. Maybe I would have later. I don't know if I would have stayed, but I wasn't really interested. When I go back to those thousands of beings, that gathering, many of them were familiar to me. I feel like a lot of us knew each other. There was not a lot of there was no sense of kind of introducing ourselves to each other. It felt like most of us at least knew of each other.
Natalie Sudman, my very special guest on Guys Radio. I'm looking at her book right here, The Application of Impossible Things, My Near-Death Experience in Iraq, and the fascinating conversation. So what did they communicate to you as a offering in terms of, hey, maybe if you went back, you could do this, and you sparked to that? Do you feel comfortable talking about that?
I don't really remember all of it. I remember little pieces of it. And the reason that I don't talk about that in my book, and I won't talk about it here, is because I think that people get very competitive in a sense of hierarchies. I can say, well, I came back to do this and this, and people go, yeah, she's more important. She's doing something more important than I am.
Right.
Or I'm doing more important stuff than that. When really everything, whatever each person is doing is vital. It's important. It matters. And there's no hierarchy to it. And also, my business is mine. I feel like your business is yours, and you should do it, and you should do it with all your heart, and I'll do mine with all my heart, and everything will work out. So I was hesitant to talk about it because of those reasons. And like I said, I don't remember all of it. I think that I think sometimes if we know I'll say too much as a conscious human personality, it can almost get in our way, because we think too much, and because we think in hierarchical ways or critical ways about ourselves or other people or jobs that we do or things that we're doing. It may also be that I don't remember some of it because it wouldn't make sense to me in my cultural context.
Okay. So I think, it's interesting. I think some of your experiences sound like some other folks, but they came across a little bit differently, and some are different. So that's cool, because everybody has an individual experience in life anyway. So when you made the decision to come back, you had some healing. You went through what you call the healing environment. And I think you were with these beings, and you were kind of working together, and you and one of them kind of got kind of close and were vibing with each other, working on you, fixing you. Another guide, whatever personality was more observant of that. And you made some decisions with this one being as to what you would fix, how you would fix it, what would you kind of leave to be fixed on when you went back. Could you talk to us a little bit about that? Because that's a fascinating experience.
Yeah, so we were kind of hovering up above the truck, the whole scene of the truck on the desert. And from that position, we could see the truck and the four of us in it, but we could also see our bodies as organizations of energy. And we would kind of do the equivalent of waving a hand, and we would set different injuries in my body. And then we would see a kind of holographic instant that described the rest of my life with those injuries. And we were really playing around at first. We would put some shrapnel in my brain and watch me try to negotiate the rest of my life with these cognitive difficulties. Right. And we thought that was hilarious. From that perspective, we thought that was very, very funny. Or we would sever my right hand and then watch me try to negotiate the rest of my life doing everything with my left hand, which again, to us from that perspective was very, very funny, because our lives from that perspective are an instant. They're very short, and they exist within a much broader context. We use the context of birth, growth, aging, death. And we put everything in that context and expect everything to make sense from within that context. But if we broaden that context to include whatever comes before this and whatever comes after this, then this lifetime maybe in some ways shrinks in its importance. And I don't mean that it doesn't remain important, but certain aspects of it may not be as dire as we feel that they are when we're in it. So anyway, eventually we set my injuries. I chose the injuries. I set them in my body, and I chose them. I understood that I chose them keeping in mind what I would be doing when I came back into this body, so that they would help set me up for whatever I was going to do, or help me within whatever I was going to do. And I think that, well, I know that remembering that I chose these injuries and that I set them in my body gave me and still gives me a very, very different perspective on rehab and, my wonky sight in one eye. And I'm not a victim of anything. I simply chose something that was valuable for me.
Why do you think you chose this to happen to you? Have you asked yourself that? And if it's too personal, I understand.
Yeah, I have. I think that I gave myself certain exit points from this lifetime, and that when I came to this kind of general exit point, I went, yeah, I think I'm done. And I think that, see, this is going to sound like a little puffed up or something, but I don't mean it that way. When I look at the different ways that I could have exited, what I'm shown is that the way that I chose to get blown up within a war zone as a civilian within a war zone, that had a far-reaching effect on many, many, many people, having to do with the futility of violence, having to do with the futility of war, having to do with changing the way people perceive conflict. There's layers to that, but I think that when I look at that, I'm shown that there was a reason that I chose that in particular, because I liked the effects that it would have, let's say.
It's amazing. Natalie Sudman, my guest on Guys Radio, a fascinating story. And you are an artist, Natalie. She's so articulate and visual about how she frames everything that happens. So you really get a different and a very fresh perspective on the near-death experience, if you will. The name of the book, Application of Impossible Things, My Near-Death Experience in Iraq. Did you, during that time, and we're going to get back into the 3D in a moment, but did you feel or think or believe that or have you learned anything from that experience that was kind of oh, wow, I hadn't really thought that before. I hadn't really seen the world that way. Was there anything that happened in there that was an eye-opener for you, or that provided an awakening, if you will?
I think choosing my injuries was one of those moments. Then I also describe later, after I'd come back to consciousness, the guys had come and gotten us out of the trucks, and somebody had laid me down on the ground, and I kept looking around and trying to trying to see what was going on around me. And all I could ever see really were the people who were directly interacting with me. And when I went back into that later, what I was shown was that everybody there was in a sense, in their own timeline. And that we came together maybe at different points in each of our timelines. God, this is hard to describe. It's hard to describe in my book. I'd probably do a better job of it, I hope.
No, you're doing a great
Okay.
job. I totally get it. I
Okay.
hope our listeners do, but I get exactly what you're
Yeah,
saying.
I
Please
hope so.
continue.
Yeah. So that time and space are so fluid. I can think that, oh yeah, I kind of understand time is relative and blah, blah, blah. But then when I experienced it, it was like, oh, wow. I still don't know what to do with it. I can't walk around thinking like that all the time. I think I would feel nuts, but it's a really drastic change in the way we perceive time and space.
Okay.
And that was very new.
Got it. So you come back, and I guess part of your experience now is you see things a little bit differently based on that experience. But what happened? So you had your injuries, you had to go through the healing process in the 3D world. How did you start to say or deploy your gift, or realize, oh, this is the gift I have? Or was it something that was clearly communicated to you in the Blink environment, where this is the thing, you into it? Yeah, I'm into it. Okay, let's go back. But when you came back, did you have that? Did you know, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do, and just start doing it? Or how did that, because you had to heal your body, you had to kind of get reacquainted with life in the 3D, and then you had to move forward. How did that go?
Yeah, I think doing the work is more, well, the book was part of that, and maybe the most obvious. I think a lot of it is simply a way of being. It's not that I have to do this or that. It's simply holding a certain kind of awareness and a certain chord, CHORD, of frequencies that maybe allows for other people to sort of wake up to themselves and their chords. Or anyway, yeah, I think that well, when I was in Walter Reed, I would tell myself the story of once I came back into my body. I would tell myself that story of the truck was still rolling down the road, and when it came to a stop, I tried to get a couple of guns out just in case this was a coordinated attack. I couldn't get them out. I didn't hear anybody. So I thought, well, that's okay. I looked for the black box because you push the red button and everybody in Iraq knows that you've been hit. And there wasn't a black box in our truck. And, I kind of walked myself through all of this over and over and over again. I wanted to remember this. I kept saying to myself, I want to remember the truth of this story. I want to remember it the true way. And it wasn't until I was out of Walter Reed for a month or two, and I was lying on the couch where I spent most of my days at that point, after doing a few rehab exercises. And I thought, I remember all that part very, very clearly, but I went somewhere. So where did I go? What happened there? And I closed my eyes, and boom, it was like reliving the whole thing again in a very, very vivid way. And I thought, wow, okay, so maybe this is what I was supposed to be remembering.
Wow. So do you have any further communication with the personalities and the guides and the beings, you will, from that Blink environment now that you're back in 3D? Do you stay in touch? I know you do your work, and obviously you tap into source to get information to help people kind of get a look at what could happen, how things they may consider, how they can kind of live their best lives. do you stay in touch with them, though, those individuals who are in the stadium, or is it more that you now have a more you're more aware of the direct connection that we all have with source, and you tap that when you read people?
I think I do both.
Okay.
I think that there are times when the information available through that gathering is very, very useful in a reading or to myself. Maybe especially when I look at the state of the world, for instance, or like cultural things, politics, and things like that. Somehow the information coming from them is very useful. And those 8 or 9 guides right at the end, just before I came back into the truck and into my body, I interact with them quite a bit. Maybe 2 or 3 of them a lot. They feel very much like, I guess, what people call guides.
That's fascinating. Have you had much communication with other folks who have had NDEs? And if so, do you find that, oh yeah, there's some similarities and there's some things that are very, very different?
I haven't had a lot of contact with people who have had NDEs. I've had some. I think that what I usually end up thinking is, that was very similar to what I experienced here. We're just describing it differently, or we're translating it differently. And I think that, like the tunnel that many, many people describe, I've experienced that in other experiences. And the way I experience it is that, when you go really, really fast, what's right beside you turns into a blur. And that's what creates the tunnel in my experiences. It may be that people are really going through a tunnel, but that was my experience. So I think often that differences are more differences in translation, let's say. Maybe if I had stayed with the Presbyterian Church, I would be describing these beings as angels. And maybe I would have translated my experience very differently, for instance.
Okay, you had some interesting quotes in the book. I'll just let me throw a couple out there, and I just shape them a little bit. Like, purpose is a personal choice. Decisions are made purely on whether I would enjoy it. If something's not enjoyable, don't do it. And I think you espouse that to others. And I remember during our reading that basically it's like, do what you like to do. That's what people need to do. And you determine that you're going to do what makes you happy. And that's end of story, in a really good way. Could you talk to us about that? Because so many people, as you know, in our 3D world, we're very much repetitive in terms of we relive the, things that we've kind of been tracking with. We do this, we get that, we do this, we get that. It doesn't really have to work that way, that people think the harder I work, I'm going to get this, and it doesn't necessarily work that way either. And a lot of times people resign themselves to lives and jobs and things like that they really could break free of, but they don't give themselves the opportunity based on the beliefs, which would be, oh, if I leave this, I'm not going to have any money or I'll fail. And you're setting yourself up for failure just with that thinking.
Yeah, I'm going to maybe take it in a little bit different direction. I think that in most cultures we are taught who we are. We're taught that, our parents tell us who we are, our teachers, our peers, our bosses, our colleagues, our friends. You're supposed to be like this. You're supposed to feel this way in certain instances. You're supposed to do this kind of work. This kind of work is spiritual. This kind of work is not. And I think that when we can get to know ourselves from the inside out, like, who am I? I am an infinite being having an experience through this body. I'm not the body. Through these thoughts, I'm not these thoughts. through these emotions. I am not the emotions. I'm the one having these experiences through them. So who is that I that I'm talking about? And when we get to know that being from the inside out, then we can start to understand that nobody makes us feel any certain way. We get to choose how we feel. And nobody tells us that we have to be a certain way. We can take that infinity into whatever we do. And when we know ourselves as that spiritual divine being, we take that with us into any job. You don't have to be a healer or, I mean, that's great if that's what you do, but people say, oh, I want a more spiritual job. I'm like, what's more spiritual than what you're doing?
Yeah,
Walk around in the world being that being.
Exactly. Make the best pizza, whatever it is, right? Just do it. Just do a good job.
Right.
Natalie, what do you think about kind of what's going on in the world today based on your experience? I'm just throwing this kind of out of left field at you. We just had the 2-2 thing happening. And then we have this potential war going on in the Ukraine, and a lot of people say, oh, there's all this ascension stuff happening right now. All these rays are coming through and it's going to change. And it's very confusing. I just think for right now, we had the election was confusing. The COVID thing was confusing in a lot of ways. There's a lot of confusion going on right now where people saying, oh, everything's going to change. It's going to be bad, but then it's going to be really good. And then, oh, look, here's war over here, stock market tanking. It's just, there's a lot of pressure on people and they don't know where to think and they don't trust the usual institutions that they have trusted in the past. What's your take on what's going on?
Well, what I'm shown is that that the very structure of this reality is deliberately shifting with our agreement and with our help, humanity. And that it's shifting in ways that are very positive. Like we've taken this experiment with separation about as far as we can go without destroying ourselves.
True.
And it's time to remember that we aren't separate, that we're all one, that we have to work together, that that everything is alive and everything is of God. Everything. It has to be all of source or not of source, right? It's all of source. And so what I'm shown is that as this shift takes place, there are things that have to be brought up into the open in order to be cleaned up. So if you think of, you have a closet that you've been shoving things into for 40 years or 400 or 4,000. And in order to clean that, you can't just go, well, I'll just paint over it. I'll just nail the door shut, which is what we've kind of been doing. Right. You have to open that up and pull everything out. Well, now you've got a huge mess, but now you can see everything and you can start to pick through things and no, we don't need this anymore. This has never been functional. This is not going to work. And we can clean out the inside of that closet and repaint it. And then whatever we've got left, we can clean that up and put it in the closet. And now we've got functional things in the closet and a functional closet. And so it looks to me like we're in the midst of pulling all that stuff out of the closet. And we're just going to have a big mess in various ways until things really start to sort out. And I think that it's a time where it's very, very important for individuals to hold their awareness in peace and in balance and in the awareness that we're all one. And I think that it's important to hold that center and act from that center, not to act from anger and not to act from fear and resentment. I think that those are the things we're trying to get rid of.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Last question, and it's even a bigger question. People, I think, around the planet and all of our listeners, we want to have a more direct connection with spirit. And you said it, like if we can identify and see everything through as part of divinity, whether it's a person, a rock, a bird, a tree, your pencil, everything is divinity. And if divinity is love, then everything is love. And once you start to see things that way, then you'll create a more loving world, and we can collectively raise our vibration. A lot of people have, I think, struggles getting started. For instance, something like higher self. They don't understand. And sometimes I wrestle with this also. Okay, I want to connect with my higher self. What is the higher self? Is that all the lives I've lived? Is it my guardian angel? Is it like a stepping stone between myself and source? What is the higher self, Natalie?
I would say it's the best you. I think that maybe everyone has a moment in their lives where they felt like they were their best self, whether someone else brought that out in them, or an experience brought that out in them, or they were just out in nature and just suddenly felt like I belong here. I know who I am. And I think that remembering those moments, noticing those moments, and then practicing recreating that within yourself, whether that's through meditation, walking meditation, swimming meditation, sitting meditation. I think meditation is a very, very effective way to contemplate and ponder and open up to that higher self, which is that core self really unfolding for you, instead of, I think a lot of people think that they have to acquire something to get that higher self. You're already that higher self. Just allow it, get out of its way.
Great, great lesson. Thank you so much. My special guest on Guys Radio, Natalie Sudman, My Near-Death Experience in Iraq. The name of the book is Application of Impossible Things. It's very different. It's very interesting. It's an artist and an intellectual's take on her experience, and it's quantum, and it's fascinating. And thank you so much, Natalie, for everything you're doing for mankind with your message and sharing your experience, for your readings. You did a great reading, and thank you for your source for coming through you to help me with that. And thank you for being on Guys Radio. And please tell everybody where they can learn more about you and get your book, etc.
Oh, okay. So the book is available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, or I'm sure your independent bookstore can order it. And I have a website with my art and some writing at nsudman.com. My blog is at traceofelements.com. There's also like all the other interviews that I've done can be found on there, and information about the readings that I do can be found at traceofelements.com. And I have an author page on Facebook where I post different quotes every day with a piece of artwork. So if you like that kind of thing, go ahead and just find that and check in every day.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being our guest on Guys Radio. Keep doing what you're doing. You're really helping the planet. You're helping humanity, and you've helped me. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Robert.
If you're enjoying the guests and content we bring you each and every week on Guys Radio and TV, please support us by subscribing to our channels. Thank you.